Welcome to the Time to Practice podcast and our summer of practice tips. If you've never listened before, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Kristen Goodner, and I'm a music educator, author, and podcaster who has made it my mission to talk about music practice and to support educators and families looking to make home practice more effective and to reduce conflict and frustration in the practice room. This episode is brought to you by my upcoming 10-hour enrichment course through the Suzuki Association of the Americas called Setting Families Up for Success, New Student Orientation, and Ongoing Support Systems for the Studio Teacher. We'll be meeting online the first 4 Fridays of October, and we'll be talking all about how to help support the families in your studio as a private teacher, what has been traditionally called parent education in the Suzuki world, and how we can take a modern look at that. And we'll look at research, case studies, and have great, rich conversation about how each of us can do that in a way that feels authentic to us and to our programs. So I will put a link to that in the show notes, or you can search for it on the Suzuki Association website. And I'd love to have you join me. Well, this is our final week of our practice tip summer, and I wanted to share a few tips for you about establishing a practice routine. And you might be listening to this when you're about to go back to school, or you're in the first few weeks of being back to school, or you might be listening to this mid-year, but there's going to be times in the future where this is going to be helpful to you. So I think it could apply to everyone or be useful to everyone at some point in their journey to think about. And I think one thing that's really helpful to remind ourselves when it feels like a lot to organize practice at home for our kids is that if we sign our children up for, say, soccer, another kind of sport, and we might have a game on the weekend, but the coach for the team is the one who is making the practice schedule and, encouraging everyone to attend so that they can participate in the game and improve their skills. And what's really different about music lessons is you're going to go to your lesson each week. You're going to hear from your teacher. They're going to give you a roadmap, in effect, of how you can get to the next level or, improve things to the next level. And then it's really up to us as the parents, as the family supporting a young musician. We are the coaches that are helping schedule the practice at home in between so that we can follow that map and make some progress. And that is a big job. And it is a big commitment, and why it's a big commitment to support our children in music lessons. And I think it's really important to realize that because then we can put in the time and attention. It doesn't have to take a long time, but it might take some focused thought about how do we help our child be successful in this so that they can get a practice in on a regular basis. And I will say it's really different for different students at what point they start practicing on their own without any grown up telling them. And they just sort of feel compelled, self motivated, maybe peer motivated because they're going to have a social way to use their music. And that makes them want to practice. There's many things that could drive self motivated practice for students. I have seen very young students do this, 6, 8 years old. I would say that's a little more unusual in my experience, but it absolutely happens. And then I have seen students who are juniors in high school who really want to play, but they really need someone to help them with the job of scheduling and maybe even getting started on their practice, even through the teen years. It does happen for everyone. I will say that self motivation piece in some form at some point, but it could be a lot later than maybe we would prefer. And I just want to acknowledge that you might feel like, well, they should be doing this themselves now, but maybe your particular child needs that support. And I will say my own parents had to tell me to practice through high school. And I always share it's not because I didn't love to play, it's just because I wasn't very good at moving from one task to the other or managing my time. I just didn't really have those skills yet. And so I'm always really grateful to them that they were willing to keep reminding me and they didn't decide that meant, I didn't want to play music or didn't love music. So I encourage you to just remember your child may need more support than someone else you hear about or talk to about getting started in their practice. And I would say that's okay. It's an important role we can take on as a family member who's supporting them. So with all of that, information in our minds, I think a really great thing to do to start our practice habit is just to decide when each day that we can practice. I think in a perfect world, it'd be nice to have 2 potential times in a day to practice so that if the first one comes and goes, we're like, okay, well, we didn't do it right after school, for example, then we're going to do it after dinner before bedtime. I know my own life and your life may not always look like that, but if you can see a plan A and a plan B for practice, that could be a really great thing to notice in your schedule. I think for some people too, we can say, "Oh, we're always gonna practice, say, 4:30 every day of the week," and that works for our family. And then I think, great, please commit to that and make that work for you. Other families are going to have a really different schedule from, Monday compared to Wednesday or Friday, and so you're going to have to take it on a day-by-day basis. And then also, you may have weeks that vary from one week to another. There's games in the middle of the week on this week, there's back to school night on this week, and so I think despite having a, hopefully predictable routine that we can have planned for ourselves, it's really smart to sit down before the week starts each week. And you can do this with your child as they get older and then model it for them so they understand how they could do this for themselves eventually. But just look on, say, you're sitting down on a Sunday night looking at the week ahead. Okay, when do we practice on Monday this week and on Tuesday this week versus in the, perfect ideal week? I think that is one of the ways that people make this really work for them, as being really practical about what is practice going to look like right now. I think as you're building a new routine, say you're getting back to school, maybe your child's really young, they may be really tired. I think for younger students or maybe even busy teenagers, when we're first getting back into our new routine after a break or relaxed summer, for example, could be very tiring and exhausting to be doing all the things again. It sort of hits us all at once. Even if we try to practice getting up early or practice some of our routine, it can be quite exhausting. And so, what I'll say to you about that is you can still practice building your routine and getting to the instrument daily by doing something every day. Say you decide you're going to practice at 4:30. If you do anything, something on the instrument, even for a very few minutes, but you do that each day at that time, you have still practiced the fact that music will be a part of your daily routine, and doing that little something can be really great. And some students will get into it and keep going, and others like, no, actually, we have to keep it really short right now. They're very exhausted. But that is one of the secrets I would say to building that consistent routine is doing a little something. As a teacher, of course, I hope people can have a long, intensive practice every day possible, but 100%, I would rather a student do something than skip a day completely. So it is still worth it. And it's especially worth it to practice your routine. And then another thing I would say as we're getting back into the routine to help us keep going is that it's really good to acknowledge our feelings. We may wish we had more time and more energy. We may wish we had accomplished more in the summer and we, feel regret about that. Or we may really feel for our kids that, they're so tired and, it feels bad to ask them to practice when they're exhausted. I think what experts tell us about feelings is that if we just feel them and acknowledge them, that really helps us to process them, think about them, and then move forward. So I think just feeling those feelings for a moment and then really the best thing that I found, what I think is the best way to move forward is put our energy in what can I actually do? What control do I have over what's happening now? Maybe it is just now here is where we are. We're going to establish a new routine. We're going to find some consistent practice times. Maybe we'll look for ways to make practice more enjoyable for our child or to help them get more motivated. And, there's lots of resources and ideas out there for you, even just on past episodes of this podcast, so that we can think about having that consistent routine and improving our skills in the year ahead. So, to sum things up, some ideas about making our new routine. I think we want to acknowledge that this is a job to organize our child's schedule or to encourage them to do it themselves or somewhere in between. And then deciding when you're going to practice, making that schedule is really going to be the key to getting the practice in. If we wait until we have some spare time, that magically opens up and that's when we'll practice, that is when it can feel discouraging because it might be really hard to get it in. It may not be happening. I think the other secret to getting back into the practice routine is to just do something every day humanly possible so that you start to get into the flow of, oh, it's a very unusual day that I am not touching my instrument, practicing my music. And then that starts to help us get into the flow, make this a part of our daily routine, and get this new practice habit established. So those are a few of my thoughts. I would love to hear what you're doing to reestablish your practice routines. And, some of that could include just finding ways to make practice fun and exciting. So I'd love to hear what you would share. You can send me a note, Christine@SuzukiTriangle.com, or leave me a message on Instagram @SuzukiTriangle is my handle there. And I've thoroughly enjoyed sharing practice tips with you all summer and having guests share their practice tips with you as well. And I'm really looking forward to launch into our school year of podcast episodes. So With that, I wish you a wonderful week of practicing, and I hope you all take very good care this week. See you soon.